so excited to be with you all. This is such an incredible track. Father Mike Schmitz tells a story. It's about a young man that he knows named Andrew. He's about 25 years old. And this young man is a Catholic musician for a worship band. And so, of course, he travels all over, playing different gigs. And on one of these trips, he's traveling home, and he sits next to a young woman. She's very successful in her career. It's very clear she's intelligent. And she asks him, of course, like most flights, what brings you here? Are you coming or going? And he could have said, I'm just coming from a conference, work trip. But he decides to share with her that he came from a Catholic conference playing worship for all of these people. And this launches a 2.5-hour conversation. And in those 2.5 hours, it becomes more of a debate, and she reveals that she's a staunch atheist, always has been her entire life, doesn't believe in the faith at all. And every question that she gives Andrew, he's just throwing back an answer, He's very knowledgeable, but she doesn't have it. Every time he gives any answer, she gives another question. And eventually he realizes, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to convince this woman that Jesus Christ is real and that he came for her. And throughout this conversation, she reveals to him also that she's had this pain in her foot, this chronic pain that's been excruciating since childhood. Doctors can't figure it out, they don't know what to do, and it has been a suffering experience in her whole life. So Andrew just looks at her at the end of the conversation and goes, if Jesus Christ healed your foot, would you believe in him then? And she's like, well, of course, right? Like, that's never going to happen, but of course. So he says, okay, would you be willing to meet me at baggage claim and pray with me for healing, for Jesus Christ to heal your foot? She's like, sure, why not? She's tried everything else. So sure enough, at baggage claim, he meets this woman, and he sits down with her, and they begin to pray over her foot for Jesus Christ to heal it. And immediately she's like, whoa, what are you doing? He's like, well, why? Why are you saying that? And she's like, well, I feel something. I feel like a tingling in my foot. He's like, all right, let's keep praying. So they pray over her foot, till eventually she gets up and she starts running around the terminal, jumping up and down, and she's crying. She's like, how did this happen? This is incredible. What is going on? He's like, praise God, Jesus Christ came and healed your foot. She's like, okay, what next? Right? What else? So he sits down and he goes, all right, Jesus doesn't just want to heal your foot. He wants to heal your entire person. He wants you to give over your entire life, surrender your life to him. So they pray together one more time. And she gives her life over to Jesus Christ. Powerful, powerful story. And as incredible as this story is, they then part ways, right? Great to meet you, okay, bye. Walk away. But now what happens? She just met this Catholic man, had an insane encounter with Jesus Christ. So she's going to go home, and what is she most likely going to do? Go to her local Catholic parish. Now let's say she goes to your local Catholic parish, your parish at home. What would she find? Would she walk in and see disciples of Jesus Christ on fire for their faith? Come in, welcome, come in, let's be in community, let's talk about our faith, let's talk about our encounter with Jesus Christ, let's live this up now. Or is she going to find an empty atrium? Meet someone and share her encounter, and they'll go, oh great, RCA starts next September. Oh, here's this incredible video program that you can watch over the next few weeks. And it's not that video programs are bad, but what is at our parishes back home? So what I want to talk about today is sharing the gospel, yes. But it's a difference between being convinced and having conviction. I think we can all be convinced of the story of Jesus Christ. We can get convinced, okay, Jesus Christ came, he died for my sins, yada, 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 and that's just over and over in our minds. But are we convicted? And I think we need to have two convictions to be able to share the gospel. The first is this, that the gospel is your story. Or the gospel is my story. If you're writing it down in your booklet, write this. The gospel is my story. Now, I know you've all heard the gospel, otherwise you wouldn't be in this room. You've already experienced it in some way. So what I'm talking about isn't going to be foreign to you. But do you really live your life from understanding that it's your story? That this is a part of your life. This isn't just something that the priest says on Sunday at Mass or that you read about, but this is daily in your life. I'll talk about my story. I was born and raised Catholic, went to a Catholic school. Our family was kind of the epitome of Catholic culture. I was an altar server. My brother and dad were ushers, and my mom was in the choir. I mean, couldn't get more Catholic than that, right? But through my life, I started to see the hypocrisy in the church. People who lived one way and said another. So when I was in high school, right before the beginning of high school, I was confirmed and said, I don't know if I really buy into this Catholic thing. And I left the church. I started going to a Protestant church, eventually non-denominational, till finally I was agnostic. I said, I don't know if anyone's figured it out. It wasn't until the end of high school when I thought I should just be an atheist. I saw so much pain and suffering in the world. And I had a friend who said, will you give Jesus one more chance? Will you give the Catholic Church one more chance? I was trying to prove the Catholic Church wrong by going on this retreat, but I said, okay, let's go and see what you've got. And it was on this Catholic retreat that I encountered Jesus profoundly in the Eucharist. There was a lot of pain and suffering in my life, things going on back home, alcoholism, depression in my family. And I laid it all out for him, and I said, Jesus, if you're real, take it all. I can't handle it anymore. At the age of 18, I re-entered the Catholic Church. But it didn't stop there. I went to college, and I still didn't know how to live it out. I thought I could go to Mass, the March for Lives, the retreats, but I could also do all the things that my friends were doing, so drinking underage, partying, all of it. And it wasn't until a focused missionary my junior year of college called me out on all of it and invited me into a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ, a truly transformed life with Jesus Christ. And my life was changed forever. That's why I'm standing here today. And in that story, all of those steps, Jesus was revealing himself to me deeper and deeper, calling to me, inviting me. And that's what Jesus does in the scriptures. You look at the beginning, God made creation. He made man in his image and likeness. Have you ever thought about what that means? Like, we read that and we're like, oh, that sounds nice. But what does it mean? We're made in God's image and likeness. Well, in order to look at that, we have to look at who is God. You have God the Father, who gives and pours himself out in creation of the Son, his Son, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ's first role is to receive love from the Father, and he returns it back to him. And through this eternal exchange of love, the Holy Spirit is begotten. Therefore, God, at his core identity, is a relationship, a giving and receiving of love in three persons. And so we, at our core identity, are a relationship. And we are made for that relationship, to participate in the divine life with God, with Jesus Christ, with the Holy Spirit. That's what we're made for. And I lived that out early in my childhood. But like all of us, that's really hard to live out in our world when we see a very different side. So I rejected Jesus. I said, nope, I can do this on my own. I've got you figured out. And so we break that relationship that we were made for. And we see that in scriptures. And then you have the whole Old Testament, right? Like people struggling, living out what it looks like to live a broken relationship with God. And you go into the New Testament. Spoiler alert, Jesus Christ comes. And he shows us how to live a life. He shows us how to restore that relationship with God. And he doesn't stop there. He invites us to choose him. The most beautiful thing about the gospel story is that Jesus never forces himself upon us. He's not like, okay, I'm here now you have to believe. I always wonder, God could have done anything in our world. He could have just, this is a prayer of mine, so you're getting a little insight into my head. Jesus, you could have done anything. Why couldn't you just appear every day to everyone and go, hey, I'm here, and then disappear, and we're like, okay, good, he's here. We know Jesus is alive. Why did he have to come, hang out with 12 guys, and think, great, I've just saved the world? He puts a lot of trust in us. It's because he wants to participate in sharing the faith. He wants us to be so on fire for him that we share it with those in our community. and those in our life. I think about an image. I have a 20-month-old daughter, and she just loves doing anything she can. She wants to help out all the time, even though a lot of times she can't. So one day I was baking a cake, and she just wanted to help. And I thought, gosh, I could do this a lot faster and better if she didn't help. She's there stirring and getting things everywhere. She's not actually stirring, she's throwing things. And at the end of that experience, I let her help. She's making the cake. I see this cake. It's a little lopsided, lumpy. It's not as good as I could have done on my own. But I see the joy on her face. She's so proud that she helped make that cake. And isn't that so true with us with Jesus Christ? He could do so much better than we could in sharing his story, but he wants to see us participate. He gets so much joy in us joining him in sharing this faith. And so we have to have conviction that this is our story too. My story was the gospel. I snuck it in there, right? We're made for a relationship with Jesus Christ. We break that relationship through sin. Jesus Christ came to restore that relationship. He died on the cross for us. He invites us into a deeper relationship with him so that we can live a transformed life each and every day. That is the gospel. And to live with that conviction. I like to think of the movie Elf, where he runs around and he goes, I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it, right? Like that's the feeling we should have every day with our relationship with Jesus Christ. And live with that joy that that's what Jesus Christ is doing in our lives. Because it's only through that conviction that anyone else is going to come to believe as well. So that's the first conviction. And if you look on page 42 in your booklet, I've outlined those steps for you. The steps of the gospel. We were made for relationship. That relationship is broken. Jesus Christ is the answer. We give an invitation to live life with Christ. It's 5 steps. Now this method of sharing the gospel is not the focus way. It's from the scriptures. It's from encyclicals. There's a few quotes here from saints and different encyclicals. The gospel at its core is our Catholic faith. I think one of the fears I hear is like, oh, it's too Protestant to share the gospel. I'm like, who came first? Right? Where do Protestants get it? The Bible? Interesting. I'm going to read a quote from Evangelii Gaudium. Evangelii Gaudium says, we have rediscovered the fundamental role of the first announcement, or kerygma, the gospel, which needs to be the center of all evangelizing efforts at the church renewal. On the lips of the catechist, the first proclamation must ring out over and over, Jesus Christ loves you, he gave his life to save you, and now he is living at your side every day to enlighten, strengthen, and free you. The first, in a qualitative sense, is the Principle Proclamation, the one which we must hear again and again in different ways and announce to others at every level and moment. Straight from the church. This is our call as Christians, as Catholics, to share and proclaim this. St. Catherine of Siena, in her book, The Dialogue, describes a vision she has from Jesus Christ where he reveals something called the bridge. And that's a method that we use to share the gospel in focus, and it's very effective. And we've outlined a couple of the images here in your booklet of what that can look like. So if you were sitting down with someone at your parish, they're a believer and you're a believer, you can share these steps with them. You can share it like I did with your testimony, share them your faith, and then outline these stories, these steps. You can draw it out for them. And what St. Catherine of Siena did is she looked and she saw there was humanity or man on one side and God on the other. It was broken, right? That's step 2. And the bridge is Jesus Christ. So drawing a cross in between those two, man and God, Jesus Christ is the bridge. And it's through the invitation, you can almost draw an arrow over it, that they come together. I like to see that as the two sides come together and become a circle. Man and God is one in the church. This is a very easy way to sit. You can draw it on a napkin at a coffee shop. I've done it many times. This is our story. So the second conviction is that the gospel is everyone's story. So it's not just our story, it's everyone's story. And the reason why this is so important is because I come across this so many times. Kelsey, that's awesome. I believe in the gospel. It is my story. I'm all about that, right? But I don't want to make it awkward with someone else. I don't want to make it uncomfortable. I don't want them to think I'm weird. And I don't want them to think I'm forcing anything on them, right? And this really is coming from a fear of ours. Because if we didn't care what anyone thought, that wouldn't even be a question in our mind. But the gospel is everyone's story. Do we truly believe that? Do we live with that conviction? When I was a missionary, my first summer training, I get there. I had actually never been presented the gospel in these steps, these 5 steps. And you might think this seems formulaic, robotic. But I was sitting there as a first-year missionary, and we were going on a scavenger hunt with a group of women. We're running, and one of the stations, someone yells out, share the gospel. What are the steps of the gospel? And on other campuses, they had used this formula. So one student just jumps up so proudly, and she's like, we're made for a relationship. That relationship was broken by sin. Jesus Christ was the answer. We have an invitation. Now we live with him. And they're like, great, you're good. Next station. And we're all like running off to the next one. And in my head, I'm running to the next station. I'm like, oh my gosh. That was the scriptures in like a sentence. And it blew my mind. I mean, it was so simple. I mean, it was a game. It was a scavenger hunt. But for me, my heart was transformed in that moment. Because that just simplified everything for me. I've been living out my faith in so many different ways, and no one had shared it that simply to me. And I finally had a way to share this excitement about Jesus Christ with someone else. The other fear is that it's not going to work. We share this gospel with someone, we invite them into a deeper relationship, but nothing's going to happen. And there was a saint who said, when the gospel is proclaimed, something always happens. And I used to share this with my team as a missionary, like when you proclaim the gospel, something always happens. And we would practice with each other, we'd give the steps back and forth, and we'd see like, okay, does that sound kind of natural, not so awkward, right? And a missionary comes to me on my team after giving her first gospel presentation, and she's just kind of in despair. She's like, Kelsey, I did everything we practiced, gave them the steps, I invited them into a deeper relationship with Christ. I said, do you want to put Jesus at the center of your life? And they said no. So we talked about it, we prayed about it. A couple days later, I get an email. It's a very strange email. It says, hi, I don't know who you are, but I was in a coffee shop, and at the table across from me, I saw 2 women talking, and I overheard their conversation. And one of those girls was wearing a sweatshirt that said focus on it. And I heard her share about Jesus Christ. And she said she was a Catholic missionary. I've never heard a Catholic talk about Jesus Christ. So I looked up Focus, found your email on our campus, and I'm just wondering, who the heck are you guys? So I met up with this woman, and we did a 4-hour coffee shop Bible study over scriptural apologetics of the Catholic Church. She was an incredible Baptist at our campus, very faithful to Jesus Christ. And she had never heard a Catholic talk about Jesus Christ and the love that they had for him and share his story to someone else. We still keep in touch to this day, and she still comes to me with questions like, okay, what does the Catholic Church say about this? And I'm praying for her conversion every single day. The Holy Spirit's working on her. But I was like, gosh, my teammate shares the gospel and it ricochets over there to this other person, right? That's awesome. When you preach the gospel, something always happens. And so even in a moment of despair of sharing the gospel and it maybe not turning out the way you want to, know that something powerful happened in that moment. Whether to someone else, into their heart later on down the line, Jesus is moving. This is everyone's story. Everyone deserves a chance to hear the gospel. Everyone deserves a chance to have the invitation. Do you want Jesus in the center of your life? Because saying yes to that question very clearly does something to our hearts. One of my favorite quotes is the fake quote, St. Francis of Assisi. Preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. Maybe you've heard it. I love this quote so much because, one, it was never said. So when people tell me that, they're like, well, Kelsey, yeah, I'll share the gospel. But this is what I live by. Preach the gospel always, but when necessary, use words. I'm like, yes, you just teed me up so well. Because then I explain, well, first, he never said that. Because he shared the gospel all the time with words. And secondly, let's say he did say that. Preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. Tell me when is it necessary? Because I'm looking at our world right now, and people just living their lives as the gospel. It's not working. Words are actually necessary right now. There is so much noise in our lives. We need to be told about Jesus Christ. There are Christians everywhere who don't know the story of Jesus Christ, who don't live from that conviction. And it is up to us, it's our obligation to share it with him, with the love and zeal in our hearts. The gospel is for everyone. And I'll end on this. How this can impact people. We're talking about our friends, people in our lives, our family members. For those of you kids, preach the gospel to them. Ask them, do they want Jesus in the center of your life? I asked this to my brother. I asked this to my parents. It's profound. I got a letter just a few months ago. I'd already known I was giving this talk, and I was like, Jesus, that's awesome. And it was from a girl that I shared the gospel with many years ago. And I'm going to read that letter to you. It starts with, guess what day it is? It's Discipleship and Gospel Ask Anniversary Day. On this day, August 21st, 2013, 6 years ago, you gave me the high call of discipleship and shared the gospel with me over a couple scoops of ice cream at Blue Spruce. It was on this day 6 years ago that I actually thought about how I was practically living out my life on mission for God and how much of an impact this has had on my life. This day has shaped my life completely. Who knows where I would be? Thank you, Kelsey, for believing in me as a little junior Pi-Phi. You gave me the chance to give the biggest yes of my life. All my love, Aaron. We have the opportunity to change someone's life, not just here on earth, but for eternity. It is our obligation and our joy to do this. I'll be praying for you and the people that you get to share the gospel with in your life. Thank you.
All right. Where are my Nebraska friends? Okay, so apologies to the rest of you. The folks from Nebraska know something that the rest of you don't know. And that is, I have incredibly cute kids. But I'm not going to show you a picture. And some of the people from Nebraska, those that I hang out with, know that I have hilarious stories. And those of you who are wishing you had a break to go to the bathroom because you're feeling the coffee right now, I could probably make you pee with one of those stories. But I'm not going to. Because if you want me to make you pee, come and see me afterwards. If you want to see a picture of the kids, I'll show you afterwards. But I don't want to waste a single second of the time I have with you, because it is so precious, it is such an honor. I get to kind of give the capstone talk for the Making Missionary Disciples track. But before I do, I want to just take a moment. I want to just give you a picture to understand what you're experiencing right now. Right now, you're on the mountaintop. And it's good up here. But there is a whole lot underneath this little mountain that you're experiencing. SLS, right? Seek, a focus conference. Those are like a little mountaintop experience. But what you have to understand is underneath this sea of people and the glory of this event are hundreds and thousands of everyday missionary disciples being stood up for the gospel. I don't mean like stood up, like standing there waiting for someone who never comes. trying to make friends and awkwardly introducing themselves, starting small groups, sharing the gospel, sharing their stories, praying. There is a mountain underneath what you are experiencing right now. And this whole track has been about preparing you to live and do that mountain, right? And there's one ingredient that's left. We've been giving you the Focus secret sauce. But there's one key ingredient that's left, and that's discipleship. And that's what I get to talk to you about. Discipleship as a verb more than a noun. Right? This is Focus's secret sauce. And really, it's not Focus. I mean, it's the secret of the church. I mean, it's the secret of the explosive growth of the early church, what we read about in Acts of the Apostles. Right? It's the secret of saints and great leaders in the church from time immemorial. And I get a chance just to give you just a little appetizer and a taste for that. To be honest, we could have a whole conference just on the art of discipling people, of giving your life away to a few and preparing them for mission. So here's what I want to do today. I want to talk about, first off, what discipleship is. I want to give you a little bit of the content, and then I want to give you a place to start. Like, what does it look like in the real world? How do I get started? So what is discipleship? Well, discipleship is an intentional and systematic formation for mission. Win, build, send. Win. If win is over here, this is where you're building relationships and you're getting to know people and you're earning trust. And ultimately that culminates as you've developed a friendship, introducing them to the friend of your life and of their life, of Jesus Christ, in the proclamation of the gospel. What I'm talking to you about today really centers more on the build and send phases of a person's personal discipleship journey. Once somebody has entrusted themselves to the Lord and they call themselves a disciple and they're all in for Jesus, then what? How do you build them up in the Christian life? How do you send them out on mission? It's maybe helpful to contrast it. Here's what discipleship is not. It's not simply programming, right? It's not simply a men's group or a women's group or accountability or, dare I say, great catechetical content. As wonderful as those things are, discipleship is an intentional and systematic formation for mission. See, I'm the son of a carpenter. My dad grew up in Cedar County, Nebraska. He could do anything with his hands. And I had access to the tools all my life. And I didn't build a damn thing. You know why? Because I didn't want to. I didn't desire to build anything. I had access to the tools, but I didn't have the heart and I didn't have the hands. Today we live in a church that is overflowing with amazing, wonderful tools. But mark my words on this, the greatest poverty of the church today is that we don't have carpenters. The tools and programs and ministries of your parish do nothing without a missionary disciple to bring them to life, to use them. Now, when I give that definition of what we're talking about for discipleship, intentional, systematic, and a formation for mission, all of those elements are hard. I mean, it's hard to be intentional. I mean, to have a friendship that has a purpose and an aim is very countercultural in today's world. And to be systematic, to get something in the schedule that's regular with people who have commitments to family and work and all the rest of the whirlwind in life, that can seem overwhelming. But I think the hardest part, the most countercultural element of what I'm trying to, of the picture of discipleship that I'm trying to give you, is formation for mission. But that's what's needed, right? Whenever Jesus calls someone, think of it this way, whenever Jesus calls someone to be a disciple, come and follow me, he doesn't stop there. He says, and I will make you fishers of men. We cannot separate the call to be a disciple and the call to be a missionary. Thank you, Pope Francis. We now think of ourselves as missionary disciples. That's the type of discipleship I'm talking about. The discipleship that completes the formation for someone who has said yes to the Lord and now is ready to be equipped for mission. We'll talk more about what it looks like, but it can take place in your family, it can take place with coworkers, it can take place with people in your parish or your neighborhood. It's a method that is accessible to everyone, regardless of their vocation, regardless of their state in life, and regardless of the rigors of their day job. You can do it as an illiterate peasant in China. You can do it as an American CEO. I know a few college students that do it. And you can do it as a stay-at-home mom with 5 under 7. You see, when Jesus comes to save the world, he spends time with crowds, but the vast majority of his time is spent with 12 guys who smell like fish who don't get it most of the time. Right? Jesus spends an inordinate amount of time, for some of our sensibilities, camping and hiking with guys that are kind of rough around the collar. But he's investing himself in them. And not just them. Of them, he gives special attention to 3, Peter, James, and John. He's preparing them for mission. He's discipling them. And he gives us, when he leaves, he gives them commission to go make disciples themselves. Because this is the method that Jesus gives us for the evangelization of the world. So let's talk a little bit here. If that's what discipleship is, what's the content, right? What do you do? Well, Dr. Sri mentioned earlier in Acts of the Apostles, Acts 2:42, that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of the bread, and the prayers. Now that little section of scripture, just after that, it ends the section and says that the Lord added to their number daily. I mean, there's thousands of people being baptized. The earth is shaking whenever they pray. Their generosity and their communion is unbelievable. And I don't know about you, but that's actually not my experience of my parish. Apparently I'm alone in that. Right? My parish doesn't always feel like Acts of the Apostles. So what do? You disciple people. You begin one at a time, person by person, to form a Christian community. And what's the content? The teaching of the apostles, fellowship, the breaking of the bread, and the prayers. So let's just go through those just real quick here, right? The teaching of the apostles. Jesus Christ is still speaking to his church today. And he does so the same way he did it from day one in Pentecost. He speaks through the apostles and their successors. It's always cool at a Focus conference to see bishop after bishop after bishop walk in, and just when you're like kind of tired of the procession and you're like, well, okay, that's kind of cool. Now I just saw like 20 bishops walk by. So it's like, okay, right? It's like Jesus still speaks to us through the apostles and their successors. So things like the catechisms and letters from the church and the scriptures themselves. It is such a joy to get together and read and study the content of the faith with those, right, who have committed themselves to following Jesus. What else do you do in discipleship? Well, fellowship. To be honest, our parishes are often a very lonely place. And if I can get uncomfortably honest, sometimes the reason they're lonely is because you feel like you're the only one who is really there for the Lord. And the burden, the fire that burns within us to share our faith with others, to share the good news, man, sometimes that feels very isolating. To have a zeal for souls, to have a sense of mission, my gosh, like sometimes that's a very lonely experience. This is the solution to that. People who have given their life to Christ, even if they've been formed in a culture where it's not okay to, you can talk about anything, just don't talk about Jesus, they're dying to talk about their best friend. So begin to create communities of real fellowship, real friends, and real fun where people can actually talk about what God's doing in their life. They can actually talk about their faith and what they're learning and where they're growing and where they're struggling, right? Devote yourself to the teaching of the apostles, to real fellowship, to the breaking of the bread. Our Christian life revolves around the Eucharist. It's the source and the summit. It is the power for evangelization, and it is our ultimate end. Now, and as a sacrament, as a foreshadow of the unity we will have with God and each other in heaven. And then finally, devote yourself to shared prayer. Now let me be clear on this. When I say shared prayer, I don't just mean you're praying with someone and they're like next to you. I mean really sharing prayer. See, the best way to teach someone to pray is to invite them into your prayer, to pray with them. So if you're talking about Lectio Divina, it means as you read the scriptures in those successive readings, you're reading it out loud together, and you're pausing to hear the Lord and then to share with each other what's unfolding as you're listening to the Lord in your life. That's what I mean by shared prayer. Or in the case of intercession, as you're interceding for someone, you are together beseeching the Lord to move and act and to show you where he wants you to act in this person's life. That's what I mean by shared prayer. And let me tell you why that matters, because I want to spend a little bit more time just on that element, right, on shared prayer. Because I don't know about you, but even though I've got a master's degree and I've been doing this for almost 20 years, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't feel like Yoda. Right? Take you to Emmanuel. Right? What is discipleship? Well, it's a formation in the entirety of the Christian life. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of stuff to cover. Where do you get started? Shared prayer, I want to suggest to you, is your first step. That's where you get started. Why? Well, because Jesus is really the discipler. He's the shepherd. You're the sheepdog. Right? Jesus is the real discipler. He's doing something in their life. And you're seeking to join in with him with what he's doing. And I'm super passionate about this because I did it wrong for so much of my missionary life. Not that it was fruitless, not that the Lord didn't bless it, but for years my prayer was something like this: Lord, here's what I'm going to be doing in the life of this man, and I'd like to invite you to help me. Right? And usually my discernment went something like this: this guy needs a good swift kick in the butt. Lord, make my foot strong. Right? That was. I was realizing some of you might be in this room. Sorry. Here's what happened. Like, Jesus, out of a blessed frustration, changed my prayer. And it changed from, Lord, here's what I'm going to do, please help me, to, Lord, what are you doing in this guy's life? How can I help you? And when I began to pray like that, everything changed. Let me tell you two stories. Story number one is Kelly. And this is like a guy, Kelly. Kelly was in my parish, developed great friendship. He was a former semi-pro cyclist. So first time, he's like, hey, do you guys want to go for a bike ride? I'm like, sure, we go for a bike ride. And 30 miles later, Kelly and I are friends. And we're working on a project, together at church. He was kind of like a techie. And we just had like a meeting together, and we just like sat down, and we just prayed together. We just shared Lectio Divina together. It was just the Sunday gospel. And as we would read it out loud, and he'd share what the Lord was saying to him, and I'd share what the Lord was saying to me, I began to notice that Kelly felt like Jesus was still on the outside of his life. And I learned later that even though he had entered the church years before, he really hadn't given his life to the Lord in a very clear and explicit way. And so as we prayed together, it became very clear that I needed to share the gospel with Kelly. So I did. First 20 minutes, I let Jesus talk. After that, because it was clear to me what he was doing in Kelly's life, I shared the gospel, just like Kelsey did, although I don't have a cool note from Kelly because he's a guy and he doesn't write notes and stuff. When you share Lectio Divina or some form of contemplative prayer, Jesus shows you what he's doing in their life and he shows you how you can help. Right? Or I can tell you the story of Nate. Nate was a wonderfully awesome, holy, frustrating as hell guy. Because even though he had made major strides, I could not get him to begin to invest himself in the men in his life. And there was never enough time, and he was always distracted. And after, exhausting myself with cool quotes from saints and the catechism to try and make him feel guilty, I finally decided, let's take a different strategy. Let's just pray together. And we began to do intercessory prayer together. And what I normally would do quietly in my own personal prayer time, I just began to share out loud. I was praying for Tom and Dan and Joe and many men that were in both of our lives. And as I prayed out loud and I invited Nate to join me in that intercession, when I looked up after we finished our prayer, Nate had grabbed a piece of paper and began to scrawl down all the names of the guys in his life that he now knew he needed to be praying for. And I watched in that prayer time Jesus give him his love for the men in Nate's life. That was the first 20 minutes that Nate and I had together that day. The rest of the time, we spent planning how he was going to get his small group started. You see, if all you're doing together is praying with someone, then you're not really doing discipleship. I mean, you're doing a good thing, but you're not doing discipleship. But if you're doing everything else, all the best curriculum, all the best training, and you're not praying together, and you're not letting the Lord show you what he's doing and where he wants you to help, then you're missing the boat. Here's what I want to do. I want to leave you with this. Those of you, you've come here, you've come a long way. You are convicted that you want to leave a legacy with your life. And I know I'm just scratching the surface, just getting you started here in what it means to begin to disciple someone. But I promise you, what the church really needs today is truly missionary disciples. The church needs carpenters. The church needs laborers. The missionary disciples are made. They're not born. Jesus' last words to us are, go make disciples. So I want to invite you. I want to beg you, please. There's so many things the church needs today. And I'm pretty sure most of you are up to your ears in serving the Lord. And I'm sure those are all good and wonderful things. But I want you to make time to give your life away to a few, to help raise up some laborers. I promise you, you won't be sorry. God bless.